Hi, this is Cheryl from the Cut at Home design team. I'm back today with another feature from Heartfelt Creations, Everyday Hero stamp and die sets. Today I'm working with the My Anchor stamp set. I love this design. Let me show it to you on the back here. I'll get it right side up for you. You get a better picture of what's on that stamp. Again, it's absolutely perfect for those guy cards that you need to do. Father's Day, for example, his birthday, that sort of thing. I've also used on a couple of my cards the anchor from the Everyday Heroes die set. Let me show you some cards that I created, and then I'll tell you about the techniques that I used. This first one is more of a navy colored card. Navy and silver is the color themes here. I used a kind of fun material in the background here called Vertigo. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. My second card features the new Hero Arts ombre inks. This one is Pool to Navy, but it's just simply stamped on there. That's where you get the color variegation from. And then I added a little knot trim to the bottom. Then the final one is a distress version. So here I distressed my paper and I used vintagey inks and that sort of thing. So you can see three very different looks from this same stamp set. By far, this isn't all you can do. There's so many more things. So let's talk about this one first. Again, the material used here that I stamped on is a material called Vertigo. It's made by Imagine Crafts. It's actually a plastic material. Here it is in its packaging. Based on the way and the texture that this one has, this is called Rattlesnake, but it reminded me kind of water. And so I thought I could certainly stamp the ship and that sort of thing on that and maybe get the effect of the seas. Here's what a piece of the Vertigo looks like. Again, it's a very flexible plastic. You can stamp on it with the pigment inks. They will dry for you eventually. You have to make sure they're good and dry. For mine, I stamped on it with the Brilliance Mediterranean blue ink, and then I added a little bit of the Ranger Superfine Clear embossing powder over top of that, and I heat embossed it to help set that ink and also to give it a little oomph to make it stand up a little bit. With the superfine detail, you're not going to get a tremendous raise from the embossing powder, but you are going to get a little added something to your stamping. The anchor is cut from a hammered silver sheet of paper. It's made by Hot Off the Press. It's just such fun paper. I have that silver layered behind my stamped image here. The stamped image itself is cut down and mounted on this blue cardstock you see at the back. I put the silver behind it and then the blue at the very back. I added 3 knots at the bottom. These I think are called half hitches, if I know my knots correctly. They kind of look nautical to me, whether or not they are. This is what I typically use on my nautical cards, and I pretend anyway that I look like I know what I'm doing. So super, super easy card to do with techniques you already know. The Vertigo just adds a little bit of fun and interest here. My second version, again, looks very different. This is done with the Hero Arts ombre ink. This one's called Pool to Navy. I just stamped it with the ombre ink, added my couple of colors of layers here, and then I'm using this wonderful Meyer Road twine. Their baker's twine is thicker than what you find mostly out there, and so it has that extra oomph and it just ties really, really nicely, gives you super knots, and usually you don't need more than 1 or 2 strands to do your embellishments. Let me show you a little bit about the ombre ink before I leave this particular card. The ombre ink comes essentially 3 shades to a pad, a light, a medium, and a dark. This one again is Pool to Navy. So our lightest color is Pool, the darkest color is Navy. It adds some definite interest to your cards. You have to use a little bit of different technique when you're stamping when you're filling up your stamp with this, you always want to be mindful of where the light, medium, and dark are. You also don't want to ink your stamp like you normally would, just placing the stamp pad down. You want to do a little bit of zigzagging back and forth. This kind of blends the ink a little bit and gives you more of an ombre effect, as opposed to bright lines where this is the pool, this is the midshade, this is the navy. This way everything sort of blends in and it looks good. For this particular stamp, I started with my light color at the top and I inked the stamp. Then I flipped the pad over, had the dark color meet in the middle, and used the light then again at the bottom. You can plan it any way that makes sense to you. You just want to think about it a little bit so that you have a card that kind of looks pulled together, as opposed to just having three colors kind of alternating throughout there. But again, I thought this was a fun technique to use with this particular card. My cardstock itself has a little bit of a texture to it, so you're seeing that texture coming out in the stamping too, and it just adds to the interest for the card. My last card, and probably my most favorite, is the vintage version. Here I stamped the design using Tim Holtz Distress Ink Vintage Photo on a cream colored paper. I actually stamped it twice. On my second image, I just fussy cut out the ship, and then I used the die to cut out the anchor. I trimmed a couple of white edges that were left over on it because I wanted a well-trimmed anchor to go down at the bottom. And then both of those pieces I took and I added Antique Linen Distress Ink to darken them a little bit and make them stand out. And then I added a little tea dye ink, you can see particularly in the details on the ship, just to add some accents and some interest. Same with the darker areas of the anchor, the shaded areas of the anchor that Heartfelt has already put in for you. I added a little tea dye ink there, again, to make those naturally a little darker. I also added some Tim Holtz Distress Broken China ink. I just used a sponge and put the slightest little blue color here for the water. I had left it plain before and I just didn't like the result. So I went ahead and added some blue water for some interest. Now the main piece and distressing the main piece, I started by cutting around my image, and I'm going to show you on one of my extra ombre ink images. So first thing I did was trim it mostly to size using my paper trimmer. Then I grabbed my fussy cutting scissors and I just sort of went at it and add some various lines. I don't want so much straight lines. You know, vintage and distressing, you get a little close and that sort of thing. I also had some areas where I did the little notches in to add some interest. I tended to trim off the points and that sort of thing. So I just continued on around the card, unstraightening my edges. I don't want those straight edges particularly. I don't mind so much. Again, if I cut into an image, that's really all right too, because those things will happen as things are distressed through time. Less, again, of these stark straight line images and more of just the rounded, that sort of thing. I'm a little out of control with this one, but you can kind of see what I did. And then I used my Prima distressing tool. I love this thing because it's got so many surfaces, this one and this one and this one and this one, that you can use to distress your surface. And you just simply go at it and get what you want in terms of a distressed edge. The little notches can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, but these little side pieces actually get in there fairly good, distress things out. You'll have some bends. Bends are okay. Some of this point, again, I may want to trim off at some point in time because it's not doing exactly what I want it to do. But again, I'm going to continue distressing along the edges of my piece until I have something looking fairly vintagey. Again, just using this tool. Super, super easy. Best thing I've ever found to use for it. Again, it's a Prima distressing tool. The name on it is not one that I know well. I probably should. Ingveld Bohm. But definitely a designer for Prima. Great, great tool. Great, great job. So you can see where I did that with respect to this. And then I went back in with my antique linen distressing and my tea dye distressing. And I added some color to the edges to again make it look more distressed, more aged, that sort of thing. Did one final pass with my distress tool once the ink was in place to distress that up a little bit. You wouldn't want perfect ink in something that's supposed to be aged or older, and you're good to go. This time I added Maya Road twine. It's ginger root brown. Again, I love this stuff. I love the thickness. It's perfect for doing little knots and things like that. It really adds a lot to your card, even though it's just a tiny, tiny thing really to add, but it really sends the message. Again, I don't want a lot of bling. It's Sky Card. So I have to stick with a small embellishment. I went with the knots on these. So these are my 3 versions of Anchor Me. I still am so, so inspired by this Heartfelt Creations Everyday Heroes set. And I hope you don't mind, but I want to come back at least one more time and show you a few more ideas. We haven't done much with this slider thing yet. I just absolutely love that and the stamps that go with it. So hang around. I'll be back in a couple of weeks, or at least a week, and show you a little bit more from the Everyday Heroes collection. Thanks for watching. Bye.